Saraya Mia, you are watching AWANI Tonight. We take a closer look at what's holding the amendment for equal citizenship rights and how can the MEASAT satellite launch bridge the digital gap. That's coming up. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob unveiled an additional 630 million ringgit in cash aid under the Bantuan Keluarga Malaysia. This was to help Malaysians cope with the rising living costs and food prices.
Eligible B40 recipients will receive an additional 100 ringgit per household, while single B40 individuals will receive 50 ringgit. The payment will be made in 4 stages starting from June 27th and will benefit over 8.6 million people. According to Sabri, the cash aid for this year could potentially amount to 2,500 ringgit for eligible recipients, the largest assistance provided by the government to date.
The government will also discontinue the subsidy for bottled pure cooking oil. The Prime Minister said the initiative, which began in August last year, did not meet its objective to help people during the pandemic, as it was exploited by smugglers instead.
However, the subsidy for cooking oil sold in 1 kg polybags would continue. Ismail Sabri said the government is currently subsidizing 60,000 metric tons of cooking oil, far above the total national consumption at 55,000 metric tons since 2007. Yesterday, the government announced the removal of the ceiling price for chicken and chicken eggs, as well as subsidies for cooking oil in bottles of 2 kg, 3 kg and 5 kg from July 1st.
Meanwhile, Plantation Industries and Commodities Minister Dato' Zuraida Kamarudin says Malaysia must fight anti-palm oil sentiments by the West. The negative sentiments, she said, could affect the competitiveness of Malaysian palm oil.
Zuraida said that Western and developed nations have for 2 decades painted Malaysia and Indonesia in a negative light over its palm oil industries. The smear campaign in turn creates negative perceptions towards palm oil, affecting the local commodity's long-term competitiveness. Malaysia initiated legal action against the EU last year for the bloc's Renewable Energy Directive, which aims to restrict the use of palm oil-based biofuels. This move was seen as discriminatory against both Indonesia and Malaysia, which account for around 85% of global palm oil.
In other news, the Johor government plans to develop the Johor Bahru Light Rail Transit, or the JBRT, and form a public transport integration committee. These are among measures to overcome congestion and integrate the transportation system ahead of the completion of the Rapid Transit System RTS link in 2026.
The committee will map out passenger routes for the RTS link. As of May 30th, the RTS link is 17% completed and is expected to be completed by December 2026. The RTS line is a 4-kilometer cross-border railway project which connects Johor Bahru and Woodlands in Singapore. Once completed, the RTS network will be able to carry 10,000 passengers per hour in each direction.
Now, the Court of Appeal has set August 5th as the new date to deliver the verdict on the government's appeal to deny automatic citizenship to overseas-born children of Malaysian mothers and foreign fathers. This is after the government submitted additional points to bolster its arguments in a hearing today.
The government's legal representative, Senior Federal Counsel Liu Hong Bin, and lawyer representing Family Frontiers, Gurdial Singh Nijar, raised new issues in a court hearing today. This was regarding whether the citizenship provisions in the federal constitution are precluded from being harmoniously interpreted by the courts in order to safeguard the Malaysian Supreme Law's basic structure. On March 23rd, the Court of Appeal set June 22nd to give its decision on the appeal by the government seeking to overturn a September 9th landmark ruling that children born overseas to Malaysian mothers married to foreigners are entitled to automatic citizenship. However, the Court of Appeal had asked lawyers to present their arguments today after the Attorney General's chambers had recently raised the federal court's case for the court's attention.
Taking a closer look into the case, as we anticipate the verdict by the Court of Appeal on August 5th, what can Malaysians expect? lawyer representing Family Frontiers, Abraham Au, explains the possible reasons behind the government's argument to appeal.
What we expect is, of course, the court will make a decision, the Court of Appeal will make a decision as to whether the High Court judgment, which was delivered in September last year, was correct or wrong. So essentially, the Court of Appeal will decide whether the interpretation by the High Court that the word father in the second schedule of the Federal Constitution must also be interpreted to include mother, right? Following the amendment to the Constitution to Article 8 in 2001, regardless of what was the original intent of Parliament back then when the Constitution was enacted in 1957, the Constitution must develop organically, which means the Constitution is not a date legislation. It evolves with time. And since Malaysia has ratified the CEDAW, since Malaysia has amended its own constitution to say that you should not discriminate females from males on the basis of gender, essentially you must give effect to that, and you must interpret the word father to also include mother. Otherwise, Malaysian mothers are not given the same rights as Malaysian fathers.
According to Abraham, the government had the right to appeal and argued that a constitutional amendment should not be determined by the court, but by parliamentary processes.
What I think that I can garner from their arguments is that they say that the court should not be deciding. The court should not be deciding whether to give citizenship, the same citizenship rights that is available, that is entitled to a father, to a mother. If the government is keen to do it, it should be effected by way of an amendment through the usual parliamentary process and through the relevant procedure that is required, including consultation with the Conference of Rulers. So I think essentially what they are saying is that the court should not be doing it. It is Parliament who should be doing it.
We'll go for a quick break. Stay with us.
COVID-19 memperlihatkan kepada kita betapa pantasnya adaptasi teknologi di kalangan PKS kita. Niaga AWANI dan Unified Business akan menyelami perjalanan kebangkitan semula PKS kita melalui segmen GWSME setiap Selasa dan Khamis untuk inspirasi anda.
Transformasikan perniagaan dengan Unified Business, rakan digital pilihan anda. Hubungi kami sekarang dan jimat sehingga 50%. Jom Unified Business.
Welcome back. The MEASAT 3D satellite will be launching from Europe's spaceport in Kourou, French Guiana, in a few hours' time. With this being MEASAT's first satellite in 8 years, it aims to bridge the digital connectivity gap in Malaysia. Angkasa X Chairman and CEO Dr. Sean Seah discusses the significance of the launch.
Again, the previous satellites that we have, the limitation is the bandwidth that can provide. Okay, the total bandwidth can provide to the rural area. With these new satellites, I think it will create a lot more opportunity for the rural area community, populations to have a chance to actually connect to the internet, to connectivity, and also to get more content from the space. Again, I believe, okay, the technology of this will be eventually become more mature, and the rollout of this connectivity applications for the rural area will increase tremendously.
The Ariane 5 rocket will be carrying the MEASAT 3D satellite, targeting a 1-hour, 40-minute window that opens at 5:01 p.m. local time. Astro AWANI will be bringing live coverage from Kourou starting at 4 a.m. Thursday.
Now we will cross over to our correspondent in Kourou, Naila Huda, who will be covering this momentous occasion. What can you share with us, Naila?
Just a few hours left until the launching of MEASAT 3D in Kourou, French Guiana. And right behind me is the control center in the Guyana Space Center, where we will be witnessing the launching of the satellite on Ariane 5 kilometers away from the liftoff. And just a few minutes ago, we attended a briefing in this hall where we listened to speeches from various groups, representatives from MEASAT, from Arianespace, Airbus, and more. And what's interesting about the mission today is it's not only a big day for MEASAT and for Malaysia, but it's actually a great example of global cooperation in the satellite industry. The CEO of Arianespace said just now, part of their DNA is not only do they work for Europe, but for the international market. And today particularly, he says, is a launching for Asia Pacific, because on board the Ariane 5 is not only the MEASAT 3D, but also India's GSAT 24. So don't miss out on this very big mission for Malaysia and for the global satellite industry, where we will be covering or bringing you a live coverage of the satellite launching beginning at 4 a.m. tomorrow, before the liftoff at 5 a.m. That's all from me, Nala Huda in Kourou, French Guiana. Back to the studio.
Now over in Afghanistan, a 6.1 magnitude earthquake has killed at least 1,000 people and left hundreds more injured. The quake struck about 44 kilometers from the city of Khost near the Pakistan border in the early hours of Wednesday morning. According to authorities, tremors were felt by 119 million people across 500 kilometers of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. Most of the confirmed deaths were in the eastern Afghan province of Paktika, where 255 people were killed and over 200 injured. Another 25 were killed in Khost province and 90 taken to hospital for medical treatment. Afghan officials say the death toll is likely to rise as more information comes in from remote mountain villages. Meanwhile, Indonesian President Joko Widodo will visit the leaders of Ukraine and Russia this month to discuss the economic and humanitarian impacts of the war. Jokowi, who is the G20 chair this year, will be the first Asian leader to travel to both countries since Russia's invasion.
Indonesia invited Russia to the Group of 20 Major Economies Summit in Bali in November. Some Western countries criticized this, saying that Jakarta should exclude Russia from the meeting amid alleged war crimes. The date for the meeting is expected to be after the G7 summit in Germany on 27 June, while Russian state media reported that Jokowi would meet Putin on June 30th. Indonesia, like most major emerging economies, has tried to maintain a neutral position on the war and has called for a peaceful resolution to the conflict.
The United States begins COVID-19 vaccines rollout for children as young as 6 months across the country. It is the first country in the world to do so.
A monumental step forward. The United States is now the first country in the world to offer safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines for children as young as 6 months old. And the first time in our fight against this pandemic, nearly every American can now have access to life-saving vaccines.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration authorized emergency use of both the Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccines for children down to 6 months of age last week. The Moderna vaccine requires 2 doses, while the Pfizer vaccine involves 3 doses, both vaccines in smaller dosage compared to adults. Roughly 18 million children will be eligible for vaccination.
What were the conditions that enabled 2 Malaysian trust schools to be shortlisted for the world's best school prize? Tonight on Consider This, we ask our guest about creating a school culture that embraces change through its Trust School program. That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. My name is Saraya Mia. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again.